I'm John Mohyi. I'm a business attorney with a strong background in technology. Incidentally, I'm also an early adopter of a lot of technology, including AI. And I always like to find different ways to integrate it into my workflow to give me a little bit of an edge. That's particularly helpful when it gets to more complex type of litigation, which is mostly type of business litigation. You have a ton of ESI documents, and the way that I've started looking at litigation is more of a processing data. So you have a massive amount of data. How do you process it? Before AI, I was using a lot of different softwares to organize that information. And then once AI really came along, it allowed me to directly integrate that information directly into AI and get additional capabilities from it. It not only, I think, helped me become a better litigator, it allowed me to go deeper. And I think that what you'll see with AI as it develops and people in the law, legal field, and other fields start to adopt it, you're going to start to see an AI arms race in a way. Litigation is going to change because it's going to become very dense. But I think that's a good thing, because then you're going to get results that are closer to the truth and better litigated outcomes. So these are the top AI models. ChatGPT is the best reasoning model that's available. But the key there is you have to make sure that you're using the right tier of any model to make sure that you're getting the right outcomes. Because processing power is one of the key components of making sure that you're not getting any hallucinations and that it's able to parse the nuance. So ChatGPT is my daily driver, but all these other models, I encourage you to check them out and try them. Get a feel for how they work and where they're best suited. I do move between different models, in particular ChatGPT, Gemini, and a little bit of Claude. So you'll notice the ones that aren't on this list are any of the Westlaw, LexisNexis, or Harvey. Those are AI wrappers. All of those, they didn't develop any of their AI. They use these AIs in their backend. The distinguishing characteristic that makes them valuable is they have their own databases of information, all the databases of case law, everything else, which makes it so that you get a higher degree of certainty when you run searches with that data. Different AI models are going to be giving you different outcomes. Again, my preference is for ChatGPT, but also I think it's very important to note that make sure you're using a chain of thought model. We'll get to that in a little bit. That will protect you from getting a lot of these hallucinations and issues.
John, I'm going to bother you and ask a question already.
Yes.
So when you talk about managing documents and searching them, like, what is the process to getting them, like, maybe you don't get physical documents. Yeah. You get a drive and then just load them into ChatGPT and with instructions and directives.
Yep.
Interesting.
So I'll get to that in more depth later, but essentially there is a workflow where I like to have very clean documents and discovery because it makes it easier for the AI to interpret it. It was a bigger problem in the past where the OCR technology wasn't as developed, and so you'd have a lot of artifacts in the data. Okay. But now you've gotten to a point where the AI can actually read handwriting. In fact, it has become so sophisticated. I was in Italy, and we were doing a tour of the Vatican, and they had these mummies, and it had hieroglyphics on it. So I asked myself, I wonder if this thing could interpret the hieroglyphics. It wasn't able to do it on the base model, but I gave it extended thinking on the pro mode, and it actually decipher the hieroglyphics on the sarcophagus. Now, there's no way for me to verify whether what it was saying was true or not, but it sounded plausible. I was an early adopter of AI. I did my year in review. I was a top 1% user. I was also 0.9% of the first users to use it when it first came out. So essentially, I have done a lot of trial and error to see what works and what doesn't work. And there's a lot of AI traps, which I'll get to at the end, but you have to experiment to find a workflow that actually makes sense for you in your different areas. So different areas of law, different types of things that you need. There's an infinite number of ways that you can use AI. You just have to experiment with it to find the proper workflows. I'm going to give you a sample of a few of the different workflows that I think are extremely helpful, but there are way more ways to use it than these in particular. So just to give you kind of an overview how AI is advancing, first we started with the large language models. And large language model is essentially I'm going to oversimplify this, it's all of the world's data compressed. And it turns out when you compress all of that data, you create kind of almost like a brain in a way. Now that's a vast oversimplification. The original idea is if we just keep building bigger and bigger and bigger models, then we're going to have a more robust output. And you saw there were improvements with ChatGPT 3.5 to 4 and 4.5 and so on, but it would always run into a limitation and you always see a lot of the hallucination issues. Then they went to more specialized models. So you have a specialized model for healthcare, for coding, for mathematics, for different science type of applications. And then the biggest thing that changed, especially for the area of law, and to make AI more reliable, was chain of thought models. These are reasoning models. So if you are getting an instant reply on your ChatGPT, that is not a reliable response, especially if there's a lot of nuanced information. I max out the reasoning time for my model, and usually it's around maybe 20 to 25 minutes and go as high as 47 minutes for one of my previous ones. The more compute time you have, the better. So what ChatGPT 5 did is it took all of these different models and it had a top layer. So now you're using multiple models and the AI determines which model makes sense for different parts of your request. Code enhanced reasoning, that basically, once we got to 5.1 and 5.2, that's when I noticed that the AI was actually fairly robust and reliable. But don't let it fool you, because I've recently found areas and circumstances where it still crops up some of those areas. So yeah, code-enhanced reasoning is closely related to agents. Agents are basically having the AI do things for you. And so there are different types of agents. Some are more sophisticated than others, and they're being able to run independently for longer and longer and longer durations of time. One of the implications of this is that maybe by next year, all of this will be irrelevant because AI will have reached artificial general intelligence and it will be able to do our jobs. So enjoy it while it lasts. So as I was saying, there's a trade-off between speed and depth of thought. Processing power is extremely important, and the time duration when it's very important, nuanced information. When you're doing motions for summary judgment, when you have a very complicated fact pattern, the larger the context that you're using and the more issues, you have to make sure that you're enabling the largest amount of compute time. Fortunately, all of these AI chips are getting much faster and much cheaper. So I expect us to be able to getting access to even more deeper compute. So just be aware of that. Before you really start using AI for law, I'm going to be focusing mostly on ChatGPT because that's my daily driver, even though I do use all of the different ones. So I think it's very important that you know which settings you should have on the model to make sure that you're not accidentally exposing your client's information and that you're reaching those top tiers of processing power. So the first thing that you want to do is go into the settings over there, and then you go to subscription, and then you upgrade that to ChatGPT Pro. If you're doing litigation, you can't be doing the free models or the $20 subscription. It has to be the $200 a month subscription. That's what it is to get basically the pro research grade intelligence. And it's very impressive, but it also, there are some risks to relying on it too much because every once in a while it does things that are incorrect. Okay, so data settings. So you'll go to your settings, your data controls. By default, it says improve the model for everyone. You want to shut that off, because that is what allows ChatGPT to train on your data. And that is not something you want in your system. So that's also important. Now, the other thing you have to be keep in mind is you can share links within the chat to your client or another attorney or someone else. That exposes that chat to the public because there are other AIs that are out there that are scraping that data. So make sure you don't share any links. There's an archive where you can go and shut off all the links that you already shared. That's a way to link the data. I did look into HIPAA data. I don't really do much with HIPAA, but if you do a lot with HIPAA protected data, then you need an enterprise subscription. And then there is a separate agreement, a privacy agreement to make that relationship HIPAA compliant. Security settings. Okay. So another thing that's very important is when you're dealing with a lot of sensitive information, you need multi-factor authentication. So you go to the settings, you go to security. I prefer push notifications because they're a little bit more convenient, but depending on the level of sensitivity, you may want an authenticator app as well, one or the other or both. That'll just make sure that your data is protected. It's a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's something that makes sure that the wrong people aren't getting access to your data.
And I also want to note for I'm in favor of authenticator apps because if you're traveling outside of country, we don't always get our text messages to gain access to our emails or other social platforms. And authenticator apps allow you to pull those codes from any country.
Yes.
That has Wi-Fi.
Thank you. So if you're just getting started with AI, there is a kind of a psychological thing where you're in front of the screen and you're like, what do I ask it? So I think that the best way to kind of get used to AI and start using it is through voice mode. It's the most casual way of really starting to interact with the AI and kind of getting your mind to rewire to communicate with AI. So what you do is you go over in the bottom corner of the app, and I'm going to actually do a demonstration, and then you enable voice mode with this little button over here, and then you basically can start talking. So, hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. More importantly, what's on your mind today?
Well, I am doing a presentation on AI in the law to a bunch of lawyers. Do you have any advice?
Keep it sharp and relevant to what they care about. Show them exactly how AI can streamline tasks they face daily. Think discovery, contract review, or legal research. Don't sugarcoat the limitations, mention hallucinations or bias, but always bring it back to practical applications that they can start using or planning for. Keep it grounded, and they'll stay engaged.
So that shows how sophisticated and quick it can be now. You think it sounds so confident, but this level of AI with its incident response, it can't really get into nuance and it makes a lot of mistakes. And you can be misled by it. So another thing that's very useful is there is a kind of a camera mode. So I can have it take a look around the room and I can say, what is this? What am I looking at?
So, you're demonstrating some AI capabilities live. Just be clear with the audience about
What
the
am
difference.
I looking at though? What's on the screen?
Right now, I can see the podium with the Oakland County Bar Association sign, but the screen itself isn't visible to me. If you want me to react to something...
So basically, one of the use cases that I use for this is I was in a foreign country and I need to do the laundry and everything was in a different language. So I pointed it and I asked, how do I do this? And it can guide you through. A similar methodology is you can actually share your screen and you can show it certain apps and say, hey, how do I use this app? Or where do I go on this website to do a certain thing? And it will be able to guide you through it. It's not always right, but it's usually pretty close. So it's something that's very helpful. And having that conversation back and forth with the AI is kind of a very powerful way of doing certain things like practicing. So for this presentation, I put on the voice mode and I gave my presentation for each slide. And after each slide, it would kind of critique how I presented and would give me ideas on better ways to formulate the information so I can present it better. If you're just learning the rules of evidence, you have to turn that academic knowledge into executory knowledge. And a great way of doing that is kind of uploading the documents for your case and having a conversation with it and saying, hey, quiz me on the rules of evidence as it relates to this particular case. And it will give you questions, and you can practice your objections, and you could really develop that skill, because we don't get into the courtroom a lot to basically hone that skill. This is an accelerant for that. So a lot of different ways to use it. Those are kind of some of my favorite ways of doing it. Prompting. So there is a rule that you need to be aware of. It is garbage in is garbage out. If you put garbage into the AI, it will polish that garbage and make it sound like something that is very nice, but it usually isn't. And that's when you get a lot of AI slop, is what it's called. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have started to get a lot of AI slop from your clients who, now that they have access to ChatGPT and they're always using like the lower free tier or the $20 subscription, they send you like, did you know about, this is how the law works? And it really misses a lot of nuance, and it drags on forever. And I just don't even read it. And I let them know that they are basically giving me, something that I already know, for lack of better words. So don't be afraid to call your clients out for using bad versions of the technology. They don't know the context of what to. So when you're doing a prompt, you have to provide it with the context. The more context, the better. Your client isn't going to know what context is relevant. Then you have to come up with a goal for the AI to execute on. Write a complaint, write a motion for summary disposition, so on and so forth. If you're just starting out, those two things are just fine. You don't have to worry about the constraints or the output. I let it run and it will give me an output, and then I will see that, okay, you spoke about this particular issue over here. I don't think that's very important. I want to hone it in. So I'm going to add a constraint. Don't discuss anything about, these European trademarks, or just keep it with, the United States Patent and Trademark Office kind of deal. Or just, you can narrow it with the right constraints based upon what the AI is giving you, and it will hone in on the arguments that you want to be making. And then you can also provide the option of an output. It'll guess at what the best output is, but you can say, okay, I want a Word document. I want this to be the formatting, double spaced, 12-point font, Arial or Time New Roman. Or you can have it say, find out what the local rules are for this particular area, and that's the output that I want. Because it will be able to search the internet and find it. But there are caps on the processing power, so the less you make the AI think, the more it will think on other things and allocate its processing power for. So just be aware of that. The more that you can reduce the amount of energy it takes for the AI to do its job, the better the outcome is going to be for what you're trying to generate. Okay, so that brings us to text mode. This is kind of what you're going to be using most of the time. And you put your prompt in there, and what I usually do is I'm adding documents to give it context. So that document may be that you get a cease and desist letter. So you want to respond to that cease and desist letter, or you want to respond to a counterclaim or something else. So you upload that document, or if you are in the complaint stage, you can get all the evidence from your client and kind of upload it there. So in the add photos and files, it's limited to 10. So if you need more, then you have to do a connector. And so I use Google Drive, and you have a Google Drive file with all the different information that's relevant to your case. And you have the connector set up, and then you instruct the AI of where to look for that document. I have it set up so it can read my emails, my calendars, everything. I try to integrate it as closely as possible so that I can have the best type of workflows possible. So this is kind of an example of maybe an output. You see that over on the top, it said 47 minutes, 47 seconds. And then it drafted a actual docx file, a Microsoft Word file. And then I had it explain as a part of the output, tell me your reasoning for why you made every decision that you made. So I can audit its decision making. And for all the chain of logic type of AIs, or at least on ChatGPT, it will have the chain of thought over there. And so as it goes along, it will basically kind of have these chains of thought for how it's thinking. So you can audit the thought process of the AI and understand exactly what it's doing. Now, if it's doing something that you don't like or has some ambiguity that it's trying to process, you can go and you can update the prompt and give it additional context as it's doing it so that it updates the output accordingly. It's kind of hit or miss sometimes on that. You kind of ideally want to make sure you put that constraint in at the very beginning, because sometimes it'll just gloss over the update. But most of the time it works pretty well, and you can kind of have it hone in on the right information. So I pair my use of ChatGPT with one of the AI research tools that you get from either Westlaw, LexisNexis, Harvey, or whatnot. My driver is Westlaw Advantage. I use their AI Deep Research. It confines the responses to just their database of cases. What I'm noticing, let me back up. In contrast, ChatGPT uses open source databases. So they'll be able to grab the Michigan Court Rules from the Michigan Court Rule database. Res Judicata, I think, is one of the websites that ChatGPT likes to pull from. And then it can also pull some of the slip opinions from the Michigan website where, these are housed. What I've noticed with the slip opinions, or sometimes with PDFs, is the citation will be close, but not 100%. So it will be maybe one page off from accurately pin citing the location. Make sure that when you use ChatGPT and you're asking for cases, that you pin cite everything so you can audit all of the documents or all of the output and be able to check it. So that's one of the main constraints. But I do like to use the Westlaw Advantage just to kind of compare the outputs and also hone in on specific legal questions. So I'll issue spot from the ChatGPT output, and I'll really want to know whether or not this output is accurate. Because what AI does is it has a tendency of averaging all of the information, and that includes other jurisdictions. It's generally really good at the concepts, but when you go more micro, it can confuse certain things. So you can think that it sounds really logical on the surface, but it's actually not supported particularly in your jurisdiction. So that's something that you just need to be aware of. But yeah, the AI Deep Research for Westlaw works pretty good. The more basic one, it's kind of like, it's okay, but you have to do a lot of work to kind of validate the output on it. The AI Deep Research is actually pretty good. And then they have tools in there so you can quickly audit and find where they're pulling that information from in the thing. So sometimes I start with this, sometimes I follow with it. It just depends on where you are in your workflow. So just to give an example of workflows, when I'm doing a letter or a complaint, what I'll do is I'll either get my client on Fireflies or I'll record directly from my iPhone because they have that new capability. And I'll basically depose my client as the first interview. And I want to map all of the information about their situation. So once I have that, then I can generate a transcript. Now, Fireflies has an AI built into it, but it's really not that good. I mean, 95%, it's pretty good most of the time, but I want 100% or as close as much as possible. So what I'll do is I'm going to download that transcript, and then I'm going to export it as a JSON file. JSON files are very useful because they are a combination of code and natural language, so that the computer can interpret it without using too much processing power. Any of these output formats will probably work fine, but you run into more possibilities of error. Whenever you can use a JSON file for the export information, especially if you're asking for discovery, try to get it. The cleaner the data, the easier it is for the computer to process and the higher output that you'll get. So once I have that file, I'll add it to photos and files. And basically what this transcript is, these AIs were designed for like chatbots. So they're very, very, very good at parsing context from back and forth communication. So that whole context part of your prompting, that's taken care of by this back and forth conversation. So once you have that, all you have to do is say, okay, based upon my transcript, generate my demand letter or a complaint or something along those lines. And it will do a pretty good job. Now, if you want to take it a layer further, what I do is I have software where I extract the text messages from my client's phone, so it comes out very cleanly. And then I'll download their emails and I'll add all of that additional context. And I'll essentially say to the AI, okay, I want you to write the complaint based upon the transcript, but also compare it to all of the evidence that I provided to look for conflicts in the data, for any inconsistencies, and support it with evidence and information. And it does it's only been possible like these last few months to kind of do it. And I'm just saying the way that AI is accelerating is just exponential upon exponential. So it's becoming a very powerful tool. So now you're basically, as a lawyer, you're just in the driver's seat and you're taking data and you're making sure that you're setting up the right context windows and you're processing the data. And you also are a really good investigator to get the right data you need to kind of prompt all of these outcomes. Okay, so I also use AI in Zoom depositions. So the reason I like Zoom depositions is because I can record them and I can get the transcripts and I can get the analytics of those transcripts. And I usually use the Firefly's integration for the depositions to get it, but Zoom is actually starting to catch up, and so you can actually get the transcripts from that. The key thing that you need to know is you have to have cloud recording enabled, and then you have to add a timestamp to the recording so that it's valid within the rules. And then also, if you notice a Zoom deposition, you have to properly notice it for that type of deposition. The nice thing about it is if you have an authorized individual under the rules, then you can just have a notary show up instead of having a court reporter. And so what I'll do is, I'll set up the Zoom deposition. I make sure that everybody is in a separate room so the audio doesn't kind of get distorted. If people are talking over each other with the audio in the same room, then it kind of can conflate it a little bit, so it ruins the quality. I mean, they're getting really good at parsing different voices, but it's not fully there yet, especially when they talk over each other. So basically, you're able to generate a transcript, but that transcript, you should note, is not a legal transcript. You can use it maybe for settlement conferences or for putting together different documents and motions based upon the context of that information. But in order to actually make it valid, you need to have a court reporter or transcriptionist basically reformat it and sign it off. They don't like to use the transcripts generated by the AI. There is one company that does, I think the federal government uses them a lot, where they have a AI plus human. So it cuts the cost dramatically of doing all of these depositions, but they have to be licensed in our state, which I think is something that needs to be modified a little bit so that you can decrease the cost of this. But yeah, I wouldn't rely on AI transcripts alone. You need a human in the loop to verify it, but you can cut costs dramatically by using the combination of them both. So that's something to kind of look forward to in that regard. Okay, and then these are just some of the other settings that I have. So once you've finished the deposition, you can download that kind of deposition and then you add it here, and then you can ask it questions and even have a conversation with it in voice mode to kind of understand different nuances to the thing and have it check with the evidence and see what you may have missed. How does it conflict with the evidence? And so on and so forth. So these are getting pretty good.
John, if I could interrupt.
Sure.
So, are you indicating that if you're going through a deposition and assume it's accurate, you can have ChatGPT or whatever other platform you're using sort of analyze what the witness may have said and compare it to some of the emails, documents that you have to see if there's any inconsistencies?
Yes.
And it'll actually do that analysis for you and then how's the, are you then asking it for the output as to what you want? I mean, are you saying put it into a Word document, or how is that generated for you, I guess?
So you can determine what format you want. You can have it generated in a Word document now, or you can have it within the window itself. And essentially what it will do is, and this saves a ton of time because these deposition transcripts are very long. There's a lot of information there, and sometimes you miss certain things, and the AI is not human, which is interesting. So it has different ways of interpreting information. So you may have certain mental biases in how you look at something, but the AI is going to look at it a different way. So one of the things that I like to do with AI is have it give me a different perspective for interpreting information. But yes, you can put the deposition transcript in there. You can have it create a summary of the deposition transcript, which may be something that you can use for, a joint agreement as to, hey, what are the facts of the case or something like that. But yeah, I would add the additional context of, hey, here are all of the exhibits that are relevant to the case, and have it basically, based upon the transcript, search through those documents and look for conflicts or things that are supporting it, or some other prompt that kind of extracts more information.
But this wouldn't be to the point where you could do it on a break. It would require way more time sort of after the fact, correct? I mean, you couldn't take 10, 15 minutes and ask it to do this type of analysis or work.
I mean, it depends on how long it is. It could plausibly fit within that 15 to 20 minute window. That's most of it. And AI is getting a lot faster. If you are willing to sacrifice some of the processing power and you're going for quick information and you want it to tell you in the transcript what you should look at, say hey, they, I don't know, it's the question was about this, and then did they say anything to contradict themselves in the transcript? It'll point you into where in the transcript that was, and you can kind of look at it and then make your own decision. I think it's going to get faster and faster. I mean, there are tools actually right now where you can do an interview live with someone about a subject that you have no idea how to do, like aerospace. And when the interviewer asks you a question, you just read off of the screen and say exactly what the AI is telling you. So you can do it. It's just the more and more nuance you want, the more you're relying on that information. You want almost perfect outcomes, but quick and dirty can go pretty quickly as well. Yeah, so for image generation, a lot of the images that I used here, I prompted the AI for, and it helps you very quickly put together presentations, infographics. In the past, I think it's been too expensive or too time consuming to maybe get a graphic designer to create type of images. But right now, it's coming to a point where you can generate those images and put them into your slide decks or your presentations or your briefs. And you really have a different format for visualizing the information that the judge would help the judge and the court understand the information. I mean, you have a fire hose of information. The judge needs to make a decision in the least amount of time, process it, and use the least amount of mental cognitive load. So using generating infographics and such with the generation tool is, I think, extremely valuable and time saving, and it just creates a layer of ability that you didn't have before. It also kind of goes into, I mean, you can actually do videos now too, which is very impressive. I've been experimenting with one that I put my entire case into, and then it created an animated 7-minute video, which was like a perfect opening statement. And I'm like, that's actually very impressive. So it's getting pretty good, but it's 95% correct. So you have to tune in a little bit. One of the things that I find very helpful is the Pulse app. It gives you AI curated news every day. So it does a deep research every night for all the things that I'm interested in. And so if you want updates about what's happening with the court or particular areas of law or you're getting emails of a particular variety, it will generate your curated news for you every morning. And that's what allows me to not miss things and stay on top of the different developments within the law. So very helpful tool. I think you do need the pro subscription at least in order to do it. Okay, so these are the AI traps. I call them the 4 horsemen of AI. And these are the things you have to watch out for. So tunnel vision is maybe the first thing you have to consider. You will ask a question to the AI and it will give you an answer, but maybe it has some blind spots in its thinking and it's not considering additional context, what could change the meaning and of the outcome. So our jobs as a lawyer is to issue spot and make sure that it does consider these different outcomes that it may have missed. So if an AI gives you an outcome and you're like, you know what about this? It doesn't make sense. Follow up questions to the AI, give it that additional context. It will start considering it now. But yeah, this is something that you just got to be aware of is it sometimes can't see the world the way that we see it and not consider everything in total. Conflation was a problem that I've run into in the past. So the AI would read a case opinion and it would conflate the opinion and the dissent. And so it would give you a very bizarre outcome that's not supported. But if you didn't look into that and check where exactly it got it from inside that case, then you would have accidentally quoted the dissent without specifying that was it. So you have to watch out for these areas where it kind of confuse things and on the nuance. So fabrication is also a problem. The faster that the AI processes, the more it will guess and make up things. The biggest issues that we've heard about is like fake cases, but the real problem is when it quotes real cases, but the case has nothing to do with your topic. And so that's a problem that you have to be aware of as well. It will make up facts sometimes, but the cure to that is more processing power and clean inputs. If you don't have to add additional context that doesn't really add value to what you're asking the AI, just filter it out and reduce that amount of information as much as possible. The last one is distortions. And this one is actually probably the scariest one out of all. So what I would do is, especially early on, I didn't trust the cases at all. So I tell the AI, don't give me the cases, give me the general concepts. And then I would manually go and search for the cases that support those concepts, because it usually was pretty good on the concepts, but just bad on the details. So then I would take those cases and court rules and I'd put it in the AI and say, hey, use these and draft the motion based upon this context and data. Do a good job. And then I'm so glad that I always double check at the end of it and verify. You have to verify everything, because what it was doing is it would slightly change the pin sites. Or so instead of being pay or MCR 219A B3, it would add like a 4. Or these little small changes that are easy to go unnoticed. So what I've noticed is when I do an initial prompt now, it's usually pretty accurate. But if you say, hey, update this and add this information, the AI may go and it may make changes to the original document. It'll try to consolidate certain things, and it may change some of those pin sites. So the key is it's a phenomenal, impressive technology, but you have to be in the driver's seat. And be aware of the psychological phenomenon when someone is an expert, your brain kind of wants to shut off and not think anymore. It wants to push the thinking onto someone else. It's a very natural, mechanism for saving processing power in your mind. But you have to resist that temptation, because you're going to fall into one of these traps over here. So you mentioned a digital ecosystem. This is my digital ecosystem. I'm an early adopter. And so in order to keep things as digital as possible, I think the most valuable tool I have is a SnapScan, because that gives very clear, very quick scans of information so that I can just digitize everything and then OCR it so that the computer can read all of the information. And then I like to use a remarkable one of these remarkable notepads. I think it's good for exhibits and note taking as a daily use. Maybe I'll write down my list of things to do and cross it out. That's a really good way to start using it. But I'll basically upload all of my PDF exhibits to that. And instead of carrying a big stack of documents around, I can easily access it over there. I think that the court should probably move to some type of system like that so that you don't have to worry about printing all of these binders and such and not being able to find everything. Digital ecosystems are so much easier to organize your information. You can quickly find information, and with more agents becoming available, you'll probably be able to process that information more in real time to find exactly what you want in the middle of a trial. But that's probably going to come down to how the court rules in terms of allowing for live recordings with AI, which I think is something that would be extremely valuable, especially when you're cross-examining a witness and you want to quickly have an outline of questions to ask. The AI can do that immediately, especially if it's like an hour-long examination or direct examination that you have to cross-examine. That's difficult.
John, how does that work? So when I do a trial and I got a lot of documents, I have a paralegal come in, we've got this trial software, she's there, I've got to talk to her, pull up Exhibit 3, pull out paragraph 2, question the witness. Is that how that works, or is that different?
You can project these to the screens, but it's mostly if you already have like a software that you feel very comfortable with, then use that. You could potentially interface that software with one of these instead of having a big binder to have around. I think that
So you're saying bring that, and then the judge has got his or her copy or whatever, and then you're looking here while they're
exactly.
Gotcha.
So I think it would help with more standardization of like the numbering of documents, so you don't have to rely as much on Bates numberings or whatnot. It's just a cleaner way of organizing it, but definitely integrating it somehow with your different trial softwares. Could be very advantageous as well. But trying to keep more of a digital footprint instead of like a very large footprint in terms of like paper, I think is to go. The newest thing that I've been using a lot of is the Apple Vision Pro. I wouldn't get it quite yet because it's kind of heavy on your face. So it's not something you can use a daily driver, but it's really good for traveling. And you basically have a kind of a face computer where you can use your hands and have multiple things going on, and great for using on the airplane. But I think that eventually you're going to probably see a lot more use of that because you essentially have your entire firm on one device that fits on your face. You can go into the same room as someone else in virtual reality and collaborate with them. And now with the integration of AI, you can be collaborating more natively with AI. And then in terms of like, I have a lot of different documents on the screen at once. So I basically use a large monitor. But your eyes are probably get strained on a normal monitor. So you just have to make sure the resolution is high enough. And then I always like to shift it into night mode. So it gets rid of those blue tints. So it's more easy on your eyes. So those are kind of if you're moving toward more of a digital ecosystem, you just have to have good quality hardware in order to make that workflow easier. There is like a learning curve, but overall, I think that the system is much better than a paper-based system, and it gives you a amazing edge in litigation. So, and that's the presentation. Any questions?
Can you talk a little bit more about the Firefly program you mentioned before and how you use that in an additional, like in the first client meetings? Is that like in person, or and you have something recording it, or are you on the phone or on Zoom?
Okay, so I come from originally a world of the lean startup. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the lean startup thinking, where I try to think about things in a way that reduces the complexity, makes it more streamlined, and gives a larger impact. So One of the things I try to avoid is actually in-person meetings. And the value of that is I can make the digital layer the intermediary and be able to record that information and transcribe it. So that's why I always try to keep it as digital as possible, just so that I can just organize that information. I don't want to be there with a notepad and paper copying down everything, because then I'm not fully paying attention to the client and I can't really ask those deep questions. The Firefly's AI, it automatically logs on to all of my meetings, and then it will not only create the transcript, but it summarizes it as well. So those summaries can be very powerful, and then I also share those summaries with the client afterwards, and so they can get a kind of a summary of the conversation. They're usually pretty impressed by that. So yeah, I try to keep it in a digital environment as much as
Forgive my
possible.
naivete, but like, can you have a live meeting, but like still record
Yes.
on Firefly and do what you need to do with it that way, or does it have to be?
Yes. You can do a live meeting, and depending on what software you do, some of them are much better at vocal recognition and can distinguish between who's who. You just have to manually go in and say who the speaker is. But sometimes I think if you have the person announce their name, it will actually extract that information automatically and like populate it within the speaker. The problem with the in-person is sometimes it will conflate two different people, especially if their voices sound kind of similar. And so then you have to go manually through and do all that, which is a pain. But even when it does that, it still does a pretty good job of summarizing the meeting.
Are there different tiers of that one, like the way there are for ChatGPT, or is it just like one?
I believe so. Like there's enterprise versions that you have for your entire company. And then they has their own integrated AI into it. It's not that good. I mean, it's okay, but it's not like, it's not a reasoning model. And they give you a bunch of credits for it. So a base version of it is actually pretty useful. But then, so I did upgrade to the higher version that records the screen as well. So it's not just the audio. And then I have a redundancy when I do depositions of both the Zoom recording and then the Firefly's recording. So just in case something goes wrong with one, I have the other.
Did I understand you to say that you used the Westlaw AI app like through ChatGPT, or do you use them separately?
I use them separately, but you can export so when it's done processing, you can export a Word file and then you can upload that file into ChatGPT. So that's kind of the workflow for that to make sure that it gets the context.
John, have you utilized Relativity or other document management third-party software with AI in any of your practice?
I've sampled a lot of the other AIs, but I've always come back to ChatGPT as my kind of like main one. Mostly because, I invested heavily into the ecosystem. And also an interesting thing about it is if you pay for the higher tiers, it has memory. So it learns more about you over time. So it will curate the responses based upon how your preferences are. So when you're invested in a particular ecosystem like ChatGPT, it makes it very convenient to stay there because all of your preferences and all of your chat history is there, and it can basically draw from that to give a better output.
So are you modifying your ESI orders at all then for a particular format to get data in for purposes of utilizing ChatGPT or some other program?
So yes, nobody ever follows them, but you can specify the way that you want the output of the documents, and so I specify it in a particular way so I can preserve as much metadata as possible as well, because sometimes that could be very valuable, especially if like they're images or something. ChatGPT generated images, you run into a problem where people are generating evidence that's not really there. So more metadata is very important. I think that'll probably become more of a rule at some point that you have to have some type of metadata integration. But yeah.
So the benefit of Relativity is, and I haven't used it in a long time, but You can slice and dice the documents with different searches and different things, store searches, code them. Then you can keep the same document in this search, but you do another topical search where it's also relevant, and you can put that document there too, and then maintain your master set.
Yeah.
Is that capability, does that exist in ChatGPT when you do document?
So every AI has its like little advantages. For ChatGPT, it does keep a memory of the documents that you process for a while, but then they expire if you just upload it, like for unlike the normal upload. But if it's in like the Google Drive, then it can go back and reference those documents and check them. You can branch conversations. So if you're talking about something you kind of want to go on a little tangent with the conversation, you can branch it out. But yeah, if you have a really good ecosystem going with a particular AI wrapper, then that can be a very powerful tool to keep using. But ChatGPT is the unbridled version. If you're using it right, is actually pretty powerful and does basically everything that everyone else does. It's just it doesn't have its own database. But once it has its own curated database, I don't know if the real value for some of these other wrappers is going to be there. So that's one consideration.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think AI will backfill in the future?
So in my experience, it allows you to do certain things faster, but since it allows you to go deeper, you end up doing more research because now you're going down different permutations and you can process more information. So it increases time in some areas because now it's opened an area that wasn't previously even possible to do. And then it decreases time in other areas. Like instead of spending a few hours drafting a demand letter, I just go through the process of interviewing the client, recording it, uploading the transcript, and then saying generate, demand letter based upon that. And then I'll go through and edit it just to make sure that everything's right. And that saves a ton of time and it makes that more accessible to the client. Some clients, large corporate clients, maybe it's not a big of a deal, but smaller clients where they want a demand letter or they need something cheaper, that makes it more accessible. So it depends on kind of what you're using it for and how deep you want to go. But then you get back to that AI arms race thing where once everybody starts using it, it's going to become very technical and very deep, and you might have to spend more time litigating than you did before.
So do you think we're to a point where you can get a complaint and you can get your client's documents and you're thinking about a dispositive motion in lieu of an answer to where AI can analyze the complaint and the evidence and say, these are the defects in plaintiff's complaint. Here are bases for potential motions.
Yep.
Are we there or are we getting there?
I've been doing that for a while. So I honestly have been able to go against much larger law firms with, 3 to 7 attorneys. But since I have such a good data flow and I know how to manage that information, I'm able to generate a higher quality and move faster. And I've been able to win cases against much larger, more established law firms because I'm using the tools properly. So it empowers the individual lawyer more if you know how to use the tool properly. But yes, I do that all the time.
No, I think that's a big thing. I've tried to do that, like pump a bunch of these appellate briefs in with the exhibits in the record and say draft the reply brief in accordance with. And it was okay, but it was and I think it's use your error, right? I think if you're talking about the prompts being so important, that's probably where the real differentiator is, it sounds like.
Yeah. The AI you give it too much information, they cap the amount of processing power. And so it doesn't give you the full output. So breaking up that issue into smaller bite chunks is more helpful. And that's what the chain of logic really is. The chain of thought is they're breaking and the processing up to smaller chunks so it can get a higher resolution output. But that wasn't a good, reliable output wasn't really possible until ChatGPT 5.2, which has only been there a couple months.
Yeah, I think I use something much less powerful for just, we have all these security concerns, but I just took a picture of the ability to keep the share off in ChatGPT and sent it to our IT people. So
Yeah, they
experience.
they may have a different opinion, but I mean, ChatGPT is one of the most probably the most sophisticated software company in the world. They have better security protocols than anyone else, and they're also owned by they're owned by Microsoft. So, for HIPAA information, the only real difference is that there is some rules that you have to follow as a formality to make your chats compliant. But in reality, at least from my perspective, all of this is pretty secure as long as you have the right data inputs there.